a woman of grit. Such was a woman during a very tumultuous time in Israel. And who was that woman? Her name was Deborah. But before I continue, let me give you a background. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, before Israel had kings to rule over them, God appointed judges and prophets to speak to the people on his behalf. When the judge was a godly influence, he would lead Israel to repentance and victory over their enemies. In the book of Judges is where we find the stories of the judges that God raised to deliver Israel from the hands of their enemies. In chapter 3, we find Ehud as one of those judges. God raised him to personally assassinate the wicked king of Moab. Under Ehud's courageous leadership, Israel's army killed about 10,000 Moabites. As a result, Israel enjoyed 80 years of rest. Sadly, though, in chapter 4, after Ehud died, the children of Israel began to follow after false gods. So God gave them over to the king of Canaan, Jabin, who harshly oppressed them for 20 years. You know, this was not the first time that Israel would rebel against God after the godly leader died. And unfortunately, it would not be the last. But God, as always, shows up when his people cry out for help. In this case, Israel was paralyzed by fear of Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, who boasted 900 iron chariots. So God rose up an unlikely judge, a prophet, a woman named Deborah. And you know what? Deborah has grit. Grit. Now, grit is an individual's perseverance of effort, a driving force with a passion to achieve an objective, overcoming obstacles or challenges that lie on the path. Yes, Deborah was a woman of grit. She was a godly instrument as a judge. Now we read in Judges 4:45. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the sons of Israel went up to her for judgment. So Deborah every day dealt with causes and controversies while judging the people according to the laws of God. This wise woman must have resolved many disputes in a godly manner, with fairness and without partiality, as she was sought out for her judgment. Deborah was an uncommon leader because she was a woman. God called her to a prominent position as a prophetess and judge at a time in history when he commonly appointed men to those positions. Resilient prophet. Resilience is a dynamic combination of optimism, creativity, and confidence, which together empower one to reappraise situations and regulate emotion. Now we read in Judges 4:6-7. Now she sent word and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, has indeed commanded, go and march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and from the sons of Zebulun. I will draw out to you Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his many troops to the river Kishon, and I will hand him over to you." Deborah was not caught up in the fear of her day. Without question, she simply took God at his word, whether people follow her or not. So when she was given the message to give to Barak to attack Sisera, she didn't hesitate. Even though Sisera had a formidable army that featured 900 chariots made of iron, she delivered God's message to Barak with confidence. "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you?" She told Barak to take 10,000 men and go fight the king that's been oppressing them for 20 years, a king that has 900 chariots and infantry. What was her driving force? God called her. Indomitable guide. Resolute and spirited, Deborah was steadfast in leading Barak to trust God's call. Now we read again in Judges 4:8-10. Then Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." She said, "I will certainly go with you. However, the fame shall not be yours on the journey that you are about to take, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and 10,000 men went up with him. Deborah also went up with him. Now, although Deborah didn't engage in battle, her presence bolstered Barak's courage to fight victoriously for the Lord. In a nutshell, God showed up in miraculous ways to help Barak's army obliterate Jabin's army. And in a really cool turn of events, when Sisera flees for his life, he takes refuge in the tent of a woman named Jael, who ends up driving a tent spike through his temple while he slept. This fulfilled Deborah's prophecy to Barak, which stated that because of his faltering courage, there will be no glory for you, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. T. Thankful victor. We read in Judges chapter 5 that Deborah and Barak praised God with a song after the victorious battle. In the song, Deborah composed, she gives us an incredible insight as to what happened when God awakened her from her comfortable existence. She exclaimed, "Awake, awake, Deborah." Looking at the story, let me ask you this question. What makes the story of this woman of grit, relevant to our lives today? What impact can she have on us? With all of the turmoil in the world these days, the world financially grappling with the effects of the pandemic, Russia attacking Ukraine, change of leadership through elections, we can relate to Deborah as a role model who lived in troubled times. After 20 years of oppression, while most of her people cowered in fear, God awakened within her a zeal to do something. As Deborah awoke, she arose as a leader to awaken others to stand up and fight. She modeled, when leaders lead, others will follow. Think of it. On an ordinary day, the Lord awakened Deborah to take action that would require courage and faith. Could today be the ordinary day that God is waking you from your own slumber to do through you more than you ever dreamed or imagined for His kingdom and His glory? Don't shrink back and think that God uses other people. Be inspired to realize that God uses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. He wants to awaken you to all that He has planned for you. So often we doubt the call in our lives because we fear that people won't listen, that when it comes down to it, we will fail, that we don't know enough, aren't equipped for the role, and so on and so forth. Doubt and fear whisper in our ears, crumbling what God is trying to do and sending us retreating back in the shadows of our comfort zone. We allow our feelings of qualification to keep us even from stepping into the role God has for us. We either feel proud and depend on our capacities or feel afraid for the lack of it. The same God who inspired Deborah is calling you to arise and do His will. And when God calls you to His purpose, He'll give you the unction to go forth. Philippians 2:13 states, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for His good pleasure." And remember the promise in 1 Thessalonians 5:24, "Faithful is He who calls, and He will bring it to pass." I left teaching calculus to engineering students and joined CRU with grit. CRU, C-R-U, is an international Christian organization that until today is equipping national leaders from the marketplaces and churches. And they're doing that in more than 190 nations to help fulfill the Great Commission. Through our involvement around the globe, We have seen thousands of leaders raised and equipped for such tasks. It sounds awesome, but I tell you, until now, it takes a lot of courage and tenacity to believe God for His calling. And not all the time was I ready, really, for the many changes that took place to help fulfill His calling. There were times I found myself in daunting situations, assisting my husband train national leaders from different cultures to plant churches, even in war-torn areas. I may seem to ooze with self-confidence in any given role, but there were times I felt ill-equipped to step into new roles, especially having cancer when my kids were still very young, having our security threatened many times, facing the challenges of learning other difficult languages, and presently being made aware of my mortality as a senior as we travel and train in daunting situations. I know that God is calling me to always support my husband. However, because of fear, there are times I step reluctantly into His calling. God doesn't expect you to come up with what you'd like to do for Him. Instead, He puts within you an irresistible desire to do the plans He's purposed for you. And then if you pay attention, you'll see God giving you opportunities to do those things. D.L. Moody said, "The more we use the means and opportunities we have, the more will our ability and our opportunities be increased." Deborah is a role model of one who woke up and took action. As she accomplished her everyday task as a judge, God called her to an increased opportunity. Deborah rose and courageously led others to fight in God's army. The God of this world, Satan, is blinding the eyes of people. It's time to wake up and realize that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities of darkness who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. We find that in Ephesians 6:12 and John 10:10. Deborah's final legacy reads, "So the land rested for 40 years." We read that in Judges 5:31. Really, her courageous life brought peace to her people. Today, the way to peace is found in leading people to Christ and steering in Christians to do the same. Let this be your legacy. The battle belongs to the Lord. The captain of the host is Jesus, and He is the one who will give you His courage to lead, because when leaders lead, others will follow. When God calls you to something, when He lays something on your heart, it doesn't matter what people think. It doesn't matter if you have the perfect skill set or the words to say. Your authority comes from God. By yourself, you may not be able to do what God has called you to, but with Him, you can do all things. You don't have to be enough because He is. Remember, our authority comes from God. The attacks from the enemy are coming from a retreating army that has already lost the war. Our victory has already been won. Let us trust our God, adjust our mindset, and step into the authority God has given us. Later today, let us reflect further on the story of Deborah. Let us spend some time tonight to ask God the following questions. Lord, am I a woman of grit? Am I fulfilling my role as a godly model to point others to Jesus? Do I simply share Christ's message of love and forgiveness to others, whether people choose to or respond or not? Am I steadfast in helping others trust your call for them, bolstering their courage to fight victoriously for you in the power of the Holy Spirit? And for every victory, do I remember to honor you, Father, with thanksgiving and praise.